was like, oh, you get to see my bookshelves from behind. It looks so pretty, but yeah, that's not what's happening. Let me.
Okay. At least it won't be as long as usual because there'll be less of us talking. Maybe we should practice like speaking as slow as possible. I love how you just went live like as that was my first thing that I said.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a few people.
I think you're a little bit laggy. Or is it me?
Let me turn off all my Wi-Fi. You can't hear my mom's
I will.
Happy birthday, can you?
Whose happy birthday? What?
No, my mom's just yelling happy birthday or something.
Oh, okay. What was I going to say? Yeah, addressing the two of us here. There aren't as many of us as usual. There's just me and Zaf today. We're holding down the fort for you guys. So, as I said, this live show won't be as long as usual because there's only two of us talking. But if you guys could be extra chatty in the comments to make up for just the two of us, that would be great. But yeah, we can have a little bit added onto this live show because Zaf wasn't with us for the last one, so we can get your thoughts on Best Served Cold, I think was the last book. Also, let me know if you can hear music in the background of my thing because Curtis is listening to a surround sound album, but I will go close the door if like you guys can hear it and it's like not working.
Irritating. Yeah. I can't hear anything at the moment, but I'm sure
okay, good.
I'm just worried that you can hear my mom. She's literally yelling happy birthday at someone, but it's no one. It's not even a cat's birthday, so I don't know who she's saying it to.
Yeah.
She's not even on the phone. Oh, I'm sorry if my sound is a bit choppy. Is it me being closer to the mic helping, or
keep talking?
Pee pee poo poo. Sorry, I need to stop saying that. Hello, this is a live show.
It's slightly better.
Okay. Should I maybe I should turn off my camera because that's just like crap. That's a podcast. I think my internet is just so bad at my mom's place. I had significantly better internet when I didn't live here. I'm so sorry. I swear I will get this prepared for the next one. But yeah, I'll just hold the mic. I'll just be this close. Hopefully this helps with the situation. But yes, just to quickly introduce ourselves. Becca, the founder of this entire thing.
Hi.
Do you think?
What thing? What do I have to just my
the introduction thing? I guess like just you know I don't know.
Oh,
the thing that you
we're here today to discuss The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie. That's a good introduction because I didn't say that to start off with. This one is the fifth book in the first Law series as a whole. It is the second standalone. Although I will say that I could argue that these can't be standalones because those are just bits that don't make sense if you read them as standalones. And yeah, Zaf was not here for the last one, but I do believe that you enjoyed that one substantially more than this one.
So after finishing it just now, literally just before this we went live, I do think I enjoyed this one, and I like saw some non-spoilery reviews before I kind of got acquainted with it. But like Murphy and other people whose names went out of my brain. But it was like I had heard really good things about it essentially being like Battle of the Bastards, but if you wanted that as a book, but something that's just like giving the very, very raw experience of what a military situation like this would feel like. And I studied ancient history, and that was like the Greco-Persian Wars as well as like the Roman Empire, etc. But a lot of the sources you use for that is first-hand accounts of what was there or people who witnessed what happened, as well as like the after effects. So I think clearly from reading this, Joe has studied heavily what happens in these situations, how things can go quickly wrong. And I think it was so impressive, especially I think in the first battle segment itself, how it just carried on switching perspective. Like, and I love that we understood who was on either side. And I'm like, oh, I know this person. Oh God, another person. Oh, it was so frantic.
I really like
and
the connections
satisfying
between the paragraphs, the way that like the perspective would pass along, like the way that he was doing that. That was really cool.
That was honestly so impressive. And it's just like, don't get me wrong. I remember like literally a few I was saying like I'm really into like it was kind of for me to go through, but as I was getting into the later part of the book, and I read your Goodreads review as well, when that came out, when I was taking a bit of a break, and I was like, oh, I feel similarly, because I feel like the ending of the book, especially like the very final parts, like the last part of the day 3 and then the final parts after the war, what I find most satisfying, because it kind of links back to what I loved about Best Served Cold so much. There's so much like mental gymnastics, so much backstabbing, so many like people vying for their own like agendas and stuff. And I thought Best Served Cold was such a great book, and like I was just shocked the consensus wasn't similar to mine.
It's wild because
really,
there is like
so
very much like two different, like very conflicting views. Like I did not like Best Served Cold at all, apart from the last like 100 pages. And this one, I liked all of it a lot more than I liked Best Served Cold. I still gave it a 3, but a 3 for me is a book that I liked but didn't love at this point. Like a 2 is one that's fine, which is what I gave Best Served Cold, and a 3 is one that I liked but didn't love. But I really liked the last 200 pages also of this one. Still have the same criticisms that I had with Best Served Cold, is that there's just so many new characters in these books, and with them being standalones, I usually like a slow introduction into a fantasy, so you really get to know who the characters are before we get to moments of high action. And because of the page constraints of a standalone, you don't really get that, so you're introduced to everyone really quickly. And with everyone being like, oh, this is a Northman, this is someone from the Union, that is kind of like the only differentiation that you kind of have. And then when I got like 200 pages and I was like, okay, no, I need to refer to the characters at the beginning to make sure like who everyone is, but still my connections to people like, oh, this is this person's father-in-law, this is like this person's like one of the new recruits that they've just scooped up. But I loved like the last 200 pages of it, because by that point, when we like kind of whittled the cast of characters down, it was like the battle scenes were hitting, because it was like 2 characters that we know, and it's like, no, I want this character to win like this fight. But knowing Joe Abercrombie, knowing that like characters just die left, right, and center, you couldn't guarantee that the ones, and in that particular instance that I'm thinking of right now, the one that I wanted to win did not win. But yeah, I really liked that about this one.
Which situation was this for you?
This one was Wirren versus, was it Ghost?
I'm a bit conflicted, because I'm not gonna lie, everyone who survived at the end I was happy about. So I was like, oh, I like how it's ended, because to me it's like the ultimate mindfuckery. People stay alive. Like Finrey, Ghost is a fucking idiot. So I was just like,
he gives me the, like, he really gives me the ick. Like, I do not like him.
I love that we were in his mind so much though, and I wish that we were in the other characters' minds that much. But I think it's like, I don't know why Abercrombie chose to put so much, like, you know what I mean? Like, there was so much of his chapters that were like italicized, explaining what he would rather say, etc., as opposed to like everyone else whose perspective we see from, we don't really get as much into their heads. So it felt like he had a bit of a preference for this character. But I think his preference worked in this beautiful way, where Ghost is such a freaking self-delusional prick. And yes, he's good at fighting, but he's such a liar, and he's lied so much to himself about what he is. And that's what makes it all the more beautiful when Finrey comes at the end and it's like, I heard you were drunk with Paul. You weren't really worth shit, are you? You know what?
I did really like that, but I actually really liked that from his perspective, where he comes out and he just says, like, you know what, actually, this is what I actually think. Just like went off. That was my favorite moment for him.
He like finally accepted it,
Yeah, throwing it back to what Ashley said in the last one, Ashley was saying that like she felt like a lot of the characters were copy and paste from like the first trilogy and these 2 standalone, or the other standalone. I didn't really feel that with Best Served Cold, but I did kind of feel it with this, in terms of Ghost reminded me like the way that his narrative was, as you said, it was very like internal, it was in his head a lot. It reminded me a lot of Glockter. Yeah, because you always have Glockter like going off mentally, like what he actually thinks, and like the way that Glockter refers to himself as a cripple and how he's like, oh, I can't even do this, like I can't even stand up to take a piss and stuff, was very much kind of like the internal thoughts that is really loud, so I'm going to close my door in a minute. But yeah, it was like the internal thoughts that Ghost has in this.
No, I absolutely, I don't know why I said no. Yes, I absolutely agree. And I think that's also what makes it more interesting, because everything it seemed that Glockter wanted was like to be a man, because he was an amazing military personnel. And I think there's definitely a comparison between the two of them, because he was so amazing what he did. He got tortured so badly and it ended up like as a cripple. And just as Ghost is an amazing fighter, but because of his own fucked up decisions and the embarrassment he's faced, and like Bias's fault because of that whole thing that happened with Giselle, like all the way in the beginning. But it kind of shows two men who were actually very good at their jobs at like fighting, but how fate fucked them over in these own ways. And it's just so funny how much like Glockter's so reprehensible, yet we really love him. At least at the end of the series, I still found him so likable. But Ghost, you just can't stand it. Like I can appreciate story, and I loved what he did for the book, but I cannot stand as a person.
As Rebecca said, he was giving me incel vibes.
I love that. No, absolutely. Yeah. Like, dude, she's married and she's happy.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't. But yeah.
No.
So I'm just like trying to catch up with all the comments.
Jessica saying Craw was their favorite in this one. I did like Craw. I really like Craw. I like Beck. And I really like Calder. I think Calder's my favorite one.
I love the fact that I like how he shows all the people who are genuinely not the worst people. Like Craw and Beck, they felt like they were morally in the right. Like Beck was kind of delusional and stupid, and then he had reality face him. Meanwhile, Craw is just someone who is like gonna stand for what's right, even though he clearly doesn't like Gao. But he was obviously going to do the right thing anyway. Calder was brilliant. Calder was like reminding me of that guy from Robin Hood. You know, that really. I feel like there was this one dude who was like, oh my god, I can't remember characters' names, but there was like one really, really self-conceited prick in that, and I really, really liked him. I just love delusional people.
Well, like which part of Robin Hood? There's like a lot that it could like what series?
I feel like it was in the first trilogy. Fuck me, we read so much. I just remember I was like, that was the first time I found myself actually loving a Delulu character. And then in this one we have another Delulu character, but it's like I have so much respect for him in the sense that like he was in a situation, you know, he can't do shit, especially when in this realm of speaking, being intelligent doesn't count for shit. It's being strong. But even when it was approaching his end and he knew he like asked for a physical scenario which he knew he would lose, I just had so much respect with how like big man he like approached that situation. A lot of people like Warren.
I loved Warren. It was the scene where he took his top off and they were all like, every time we see you enter in battle, you've got less and less clothes on. And he was like, well, I'm not wearing a shirt in this because it's just going to chafe my nipples. I was like, you know what, fair enough. But then it threw back to it like when he was dying, and he said that the guy that did the runes for him and said when he was going to die that he was talking shit. And he was like, if I'd have known I was going to die today, I would have worn more armor. And I was like, yeah, that might have been sensible.
But yeah, I think there was something very beautifully northern about him. Like he was the northern stereotype that, like, again, it serves best served cold even better because it's like, oh, northerners are dumb, this, that, or the other. And it's like, oh, they're not really that bad. And then you read this and they're like, oh, yeah. They are. That, I like that. I like this comment. He did know. He did know.
Which, I mean, I do feel bad for him in that respect. That, like, he's pathetic and he has to know that as well.
That's also one of the reasons why I kind of... He's not pathetic, but one of the reasons I really like Calder's brother Scale, because he's just so simple, but in like this really heartwarming way. Like he's just a good guy. He cares about his family, and it was like when they like reunite and everything, it was just like my heart. I love him. Like I want to marry him. Just me. Pick me. He doesn't
I
need
really
to break.
like how their situation turned out as well. Like how, because Calder obviously gives him the chain, which I was like, why the fuck have you done that? But then later on, obviously, we find out that like he's still calling the shots. It's just Scale is the actual king. So we have like a kind of Glockter situation there as well, like with Glockter and Giselle in the Union. I also really like the Northman, and it's interesting because like I feel like this is the same dynamic we had in the trilogy where like I really liked Logan, for example, and like yeah, Logan does a lot of bad stuff, but there's just something about the Northman that seems really honest.
Like a lot
they
of
like
people,
really
they're not playing a farce, and I think that's another reason I didn't like Black Dao, because on top of just being like, I hate people who are overly violent for like the sake of being overly violent, but when you know it's a farce, it feels even. It made me like him even less, because it feels like you follow all these other men, even men, sometimes the men who are working under him, they are genuinely like trying to make the best out of the situation. They genuinely think they're fighting for their country. And then you have people like Beck who are so important to the narrative to feed this idea that like, oh, they believe the propaganda that this is for our country, this is for the best for our entire collective peoples. But it's like they've just I'm sorry. My mom's chanting now. Like, what the hell? But yeah, like they're believing their propaganda, and it's like it's all false. Like this guy who's just taken his position as false, and that's why like the beauty and the simplicity of Scale. It's nice that it worked out for Bethard, even the grave. You know what I mean?
I do think it was really interesting the different perspectives we got on some of the characters from the first trilogy in this book, because like I remember hating Black Doe in the trilogy because he was awful. Like everyone else who was around with like Three Trees, Logan, and Dogman, they were all right, and Black Doe was awful. But in this, he wasn't that bad. Like he was quite, apart from being quite volatile, he was pretty reasonable, I would say, the majority of the time. And he was the one who was like literally kind of dragging the Northman down in the trilogy, because he was the one who was doing all of the terrible stuff while the rest of them were kind of just like going along with the war.
Yeah. I think that on one part he was kind of being who he thought he needed to be, because I think maybe to a degree, and this is me maybe trying to read into him so much, he was kind of tired of everything the North has gone through. And he just like, to be a strong leader, you need to be someone who can actually put up a fight and be someone that other people won't fuck with. And that's the beauty of Calder giving Scale the link, because when it comes down to it, can't fight for shit, but Scale can. So Scale's like the perfect image for what a king needs to be, and that's why it's like so much more satisfying how it ends. But it's like, yeah, I just personally couldn't find anything really redeemable for me about
at the point where Scale is now, he isn't a perfect picture of like a Northern King, because he's lost his sword arm. He had a limp, which we don't know why he had a limp, but the way that he was described as dragging his foot behind, it kind of seems like a limp that he's going to have forever. He had like sunken cheeks and stuff, and it seemed like all the fight was gone out of him. So like I'm interested to see if we see him later, which we might, if they're going to war with the Hysteria? Yeah, Hysteria, right?
Yeah, is that the one that Bayard is on top of right now, or is it the one that Monza is on top of?
It's the one that Monza's on top of. They go into war with Monza because at the end of Best Served Cold, they asked her to join the Union and like team up with the Union, and she said no. So that's why they're going to war with her now. But it'll be interesting to see how he is in further books based on his description of like how he was, because like he's not because obviously the Northmen prize like physical fitness and like strength above everything else. So I feel like he's not currently representing that, but then Calder is obviously the brains of the operation.
It's like it is a matter for him to see how long he's going to survive in that position, and that's what also makes it interesting, because again, the Glockter comparison, when reading Best Served Cold, you see that he's still doing his thing, and a lot of people already know Glockter is the one who's running the ship. And I think that was interesting because we were reading from the perspective of characters who are in the know. I wonder how much we're going to see of that in the next book in this series, like Calder is the one who's actually running things. And I am intrigued to find out what necessarily happened to Scale because I don't really feel like it was fully stated, but this is like clearly not the same. But the Bloody Nine only was like missing a finger, like you might still be able to make it work. I don't know. But that leads to this question. I think he's still alive.
Right. So we've thought that he's alive for all of this time. After this book, I'm not sure. I don't know whether the assumption that Logan is alive is what keeps Logan alive as opposed to him ever actually coming back. Like at this point, I don't know if he's ever coming back or whether we will just continue forever to expect him to come back. And that's the joke almost. That he never actually does. Because in this, there was a moment when I was like, is Logan coming back though? And that was genius. Like the battle strategy where they were all cackling and pretending to be Logan. That was great. But like, I don't know if he's coming back.
So here's my reasoning, and it's so kind of abstract, but work with me here. So you remember the very last scene of the original trilogy was literally Logan yeeting himself out of like a fucking window on some high ass hill. And then this Best Served Cold starts with Monza, like after the little like conversations being yeeted out of like a window down a hill. And I was like, first of all, I think that's a really smart transition. And it's not something like it's only something that after I was like midway through this book and I was like, because they meant it was like early on they mentioned Monza and I was like, oh yeah. And then I was thinking about how I wanted Logan and I was like, hold on, it's interesting how he did that. But then also I don't know, they talk about him too much at this point. Like, and there's something
I think that's
supernatural about him.
I think that the way that Joe Abercrombie subverts stuff and the way that everything comes back around to be kind of like meaningless, and that like the kind of there is points to be made in this series, but a big overarching one is that like everything's shit and will always be shit. I think that the belief that Logan is alive is the joke. And that we'll get to a point where Logan is not alive, and Joe Abercrombie's like, well, no, like I never, like, why do you think that he is? Because like when we said when he fell out of or jumped off the cliff, and he said like still alive, that was his recurring thing. That in itself can be the joke that now he's not alive, and it could literally it could go either way.
Yeah. And also it could be like a kind of literary death where in the sense that he might not be confirmed dead, but he's dead to us as the reader because we don't actually hear from him again. I would like to hope we do because a part of me still feels very unresolved about that whole fucking Pharaoh shenanigans. Like, and just, I'm still so annoyed, and I feel like a part of me kind of enjoyed Best Served Cold more than the original trilogy, even though the original trilogy had a bit more magic, just because it felt like it actually ended. Like to me, it felt like, oh, there was an actual conclusion here. Like, more was going to happen afterwards. But it felt like the story that began actually had a satisfying conclusion, as opposed to like Bias being like, well, I've chosen the next ruler. And I need to know this motherfucker's strategy. Because he firstly like chose who's going to be the king of the union. And now he's a puppet king, Giselle. And now he's trying to do like a similar thing, decide who's the person who's ruling the North. So I'm just here like, what is your big strategy here? Like, are you just trying to like control all the rulers of the world? What's going on here?
Well, he did say in this one that like he places bets, but he doesn't just place the one. Like he places a lot. And I think that's a big part of his strategy, is just trying to control every outcome. To what end is an interesting question. I don't know. What was he even doing in this book? Like, what did they make cannons? Is that what they made?
So he was like, oh, I wanted to test some cannons and whatnot. But I also think it was because him and Ishri were like on two sides of like this like hidden magical side of things and like going against each other. But I think he just didn't want to see her win. She wanted to be on the side of whoever was going to win this conflict so that they'd owe him. And I don't know. Like they did, like the one thing that we learned quite early on in the first book is like the North has such a strong link to magic that maybe there's something there that he wants to monopolize on in some way. But honestly, it's like everything we read this entire like 500-page book was just depressing. Like mostly it was just depressing. Like it was much.
Because the only goal at the only thing that happened at the end of this book, aside from the bias stuff, which moves the overarching plot, is that we thinned out the cast list.
Yeah.
Like literally nothing was accomplished. We just thinned out the cast. And it was sad, like especially on the part of the Northmen, getting to the end and being like, well, there's 4 left of the dozen, and they're not even the original 4 that were in there at the start of the book. And also the fact that like this took place over like 3 days. And it seemed like forever, and they were saying it felt like forever. And like at one point, I can't remember what happened. Oh, it was Finry saying that she was captured like yesterday. And I was like, excuse me. But it was like literally the day before. It just seemed so much
Dude,
longer.
when Elise's husband came, and then you realize, like, it brings back into context, like, oh shit, it was only so I'm sorry, can we talk about this? My heart hurts so deeply for her. It's such a fucking unfair situation. Like, it's disgusting. Like, regardless of how, like, nice the dude might seem in the context of the Northern fight, whatever, he's a prick. I hate everyone who enabled that situation. And Finry's kind of a fucking traitor, but I understand she's trying to, like, keep her own back safe. But
Finry, though, if I was in her position, I would do the same. Like, I feel like we all would do the same in her situation, and it sucks. But I like that we kind of saw the portrayal of that and how she does feel a lot of guilt for it, and she tried to get it back. But what was her option? To stay there for what?
No, absolutely not. And she did try
like,
to vie for her. Yeah, I just hope that.
But
like,
also, I feel like there was a divide there between the giant and the rest of the North, because even the Northmen are scared of the giant. You have no audio right now.
I'm a dumbass. I accidentally tapped my mic. Sorry. I feel like that's something that they really tried to solidify in like the original trilogy, because I remember there was a fight with a giant.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was actually a fight Logan had. Correct me if I'm wrong. And they kind of really cemented how scared everyone else is of them, and there's like something supernatural about them. There's something that like feels.
I don't know, was it a giant or was it the guy that was like the mountain?
Yeah, I thought it was like the guy who was like the mountain, but I thought he was a giant.
I don't think he's a giant. I think he's like the mountain. I think there was something like up with him. Well, speaking of that stuff, actually, do you know the people that the Northmen were originally scared of? I can't remember what they were called. But they were like they were created by one of the immortals at some point in time, we found out. But they were coming in from the north all the time. That's why the Northmen were moving out, because they were taking over the land.
Oh yeah, those weird beast like insect things that like
where are they?
The Shanker. Thank you.
Yeah. Where are they now?
Valid.
I don't think we conquered them. And like they're not part of the North anymore, as far as I can tell.
I think this entire fight, because it is between the Union and the North, I think it is in like the southernmost region of the North, as opposed to like further up north, because I'm pretty sure the Shanker were coming from like even further up north.
Shanker are always far north. And did the Red Woman survive? I think she did, didn't she? There was a magician that was working with Ethod. And I don't think she died, so she is also still technically somewhere. Mm-hmm. But I thought that it was weird, because like, yeah, the Shanker are further north, but they weren't even mentioned in this, which seems weird when it was like half of the cast of Northmen.
A part of me wouldn't be surprised if they forgot about them for 3 days. Well, 4 days. 5 days really, because you're the day before and then you're the day after. But
they don't even make any like reference. You know when or any, you know, like how they keep referencing the guy that I can't remember, who's like the legendary guy, and like everything's named after, like Scarlin, is it Scarlin? There's like Scarlin's Fincher as a place, and like he's like the legendary warrior is on the map. Like in places where these things exist, they become part of like the sayings and the law, so like you'd curse them or something, you know? Yeah, Scarlin's finger. So like he's a legendary warrior. You'd like curse the monsters and stuff, or reference them, or like, I don't know, say something stupid like you.
So I hardly reference the fucking thing, because like, I'm sorry if you can see, like, oh, I'm sorry. This is not working. I'm like, can you see nothing? But like, I was reading it on I got a new iPad, and I was reading on that, and it's just blurry. The map is like not showing up properly. So I was like, yay, I finally got a map I can't use.
Love that for you.
Thanks. I was really shit with place names for this entire thing. So someone says that they think they're still alive, the Red Woman.
Red Woman. I don't think she's called the Red Woman. She's called the Red something, because I know she's exactly like the Red Woman in Game of Thrones.
The way we have to make those associations to get through this, yes. Because there's just like this overhaul of characters, and obviously there are awesome similarities. I wouldn't be surprised if Joe had some like inspiration from Martin, but I do love like how much of this is his own thing, and there's like magic does not play a big role in this. And I guess I don't know, like a part of me, it did kind of impede me a wee bit, because I was expecting like a bit more. But at most, we had Ishri using gunpowder and Bayaz being like his cannons. Like, that's not really giving like what I wanted you to give.
I'm really interested to see where the next book's going to take it, which is Red Country, because I think that's Joe Abercrombie's take on a Western. And where is it set? Because Bayaz just invented cannons. So I'm assuming we have some sort of guns or gunpowder or something for it to be considered a Western. But, like, what area of the world could that be if Bayaz has only just invented cannons in this area?
So, I'm trying to revisualize off the top of my head, but it's like the north is up here, and then underneath we have like where the Union are, and then I feel like to the east is where Pharaoh was from. Please, someone correct me if I'm wrong. And then like a bit more to the south is where Monza is. That's how I'm remembering things. Like, I don't know. Maybe they've described things a little bit better. This thing is set in the far country. What is that? Is that going to be like west though? Like, is it western, like genuinely the west of the world? Because that would make sense, especially if like the east is like where Pharaoh is from.
Their journey will take them across the barren plains to a frontier town. Costco's. Okay, that makes sense.
West of the north and north of the Old Empire. Okay. So it is west.
Even worse. I was just gonna say, did Costco survive? He did, didn't he? But he does, because it says here it'll force them into an alliance with Nicomo Costco, infamous soldier of fortune.
Did you not like him?
So is he?
Did you not like Costco?
Oh no, I do. I really, really like him. He's like
I love him. Oh, he's so flamboyant and stupid and fantastic. like again, like the previous book, I have so many thoughts, but Costco definitely like, oh, what a fantastic character, especially the way he like fucked over Morvir at the end. That was so satisfying to read. Oh my god, I was like, everything about Best of Cold was beautiful. It was redemption, revenge, recompense in every single shape or form, and I fucking loved that. It was just I didn't give a rating for that one. Just quickly, I'm going to give one now. I want to say that for me, Best of Cold was 4.5 to 5 stars. I loved that book. This one, I can appreciate for what it is, and the fact that I was able to enjoy a book that was so heavily military strategy is something that like I wouldn't have expected to do unless it is like studying ancient history. So this one's a bit more of a 3 to 4, just because like I didn't like it as much.
Sorry, I've just read the synopsis for Sharp Ends, which is the first book in the trilogy. No, the
one after.
Short stories, and it actually looks really good.
Did you spoil yourself?
No, because it's short stories, so they're set like throughout everything that we've already read so far, I think. But I am confused about because now I'm looking at the first chapter, the synopsis of the first book in the trilogy, because this is obviously set in the in-between all of the standalones, but then I'm wondering if the main plot of the trilogy is then going to be the war that's being assembled now with like Monza being the head of Styria and stuff, and like that's going to be like the main political focus while the actual magic stuff happening in the background.
How did you feel about Monza?
It says at the beginning of the synopsis, the chimneys of industry rise over Adua, and it's like, how much have we accelerated society within the period of this, like, 15 years?
But you could say the same thing about the actual Industrial Revolution, no?
15 years, though, because, like I said, Baez just invented cannons, which were invented over here in, like, the 1700s, potentially earlier. I'm saying 1700s because I know, obviously, pirates had them, and that was, like, 1700s, I think. So, like, then the Industrial Revolution was the late 1800s, was it not?
Yeah, but I also think that if Baez is the one who's helping invent this shit, he is a magic man. And he probably has access to a lot of funds, considering he has all of these leaders.
Oh, and he is Valentin Bilk, is he not?
Huh?
He's Valentin Bilk, isn't he? The bank. That's
Baez. He controls
it.
So exactly, he's big money, and so it's just like, I wouldn't be surprised he has the magic, the investment, and probably a lot of people under his payroll, to be able to get that far. But what was going through my head is, like, when you say Western, yeah, I'm imagining cowboy hats. I'm imagining bar shoot 'em ups and shit. So it's just like, after what we've just went through,
in the second era of Miss Bourne, and it's not a good time.
Oh no, it's also a Western.
Well. Oh yeah.
I don't know how I feel about them, because I've been watching my man play Red Dead Redemption, and I'm like, you know what, this is okay. I'm kind of into this, but reading it feels a bit jarring. The idea of, like, God, what we've been through to that just feels like, wait, it feels like we just went from, like, the early, like, thousands to, like, freaking, I don't know, like, as you said, like 1800s. It just feels wrong.
As Deb said, the Red Country cover does still have a sword, even though it's a Western. I want to know why it's considered a Western. I just don't.
And what are the things that clarify something to be a Western? Because my brain also can't comprehend. Again, maybe this is me being, because I'm ignorant to the genre like that, but I can't comprehend anything that isn't set in our actual world and not in that period of time as something that's a Western. Like, what considers something in a completely different, fantastical world a Western?
Oh, I mean, Miss Bourne Era 2, the main character is he's from the same place that Miss Bourne Era 1 set, but he left and went out into the country, where he's a lawmaker, which is essentially like a vigilante sheriff. And he solves crime and, like, catches criminals and stuff, and then he comes back to the city and kind of has to set that aside, but then ends up, like, not, and there's like almost like a heist. No, it's not a heist. It's like a jewel thief kind of plot that he's trying to get to the bottom of, and, like, people are also going missing. There is guns as well. Is the horses? Maybe.
There have to be horses.
Well, I mean, there is. I'm trying to think if there's horses in Miss Bourne in general. I can't remember. There's trains. There's a lot of, like, train fights and fight scenes on trains, which is one of my pet peeves. Like, I've read multiple books with them, and I felt like they were all very close together, and it was really annoying me.
It makes me think of that one movie with Will Smith, where he's a cowboy, and there's that giant train fight with the giant robot spider, I think it's the end.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fucking amazing.
Yes, and like first era. Red Country. The live show for Red Country is planned for January, and then it should technically be December, but we don't do live shows in December because nobody needs that. Frontier and the Gold Rush is what's bringing the Western.
But then that also comes down to, like, there was a lot of industrial revolution during, like, it was a pre-industrial revolution time, I think, because trains became such a massive thing. There was, like, guns were being mass produced and given to the common man, as opposed to just something that was, like, left towards the military and lawmakers. So
it's hard because the Wild West as well is very much American, isn't it? Like, it's not. I don't even think we have a comparable era.
I think that was the movie's name. It was called Wild West. It's so good.
My brain just went to, because you were talking about like the period and it matching it with the Industrial Revolution. So I saw that comment as said Wild Wild West, even though I'd already read it and known that was the Will Smith movie. But yeah, like we don't have like a Wild West kind of like equivalent in British history. Like I think it's very American.
We're very boring. We're all too close together to even have a barren landscape like that. Our barren landscape is the countryside.
Yeah, it's like the Yorkshire Moors, and I mean, like Heathcliff and Catherine are throwing themselves around there, like crying about how much they love each other. So, like, there's no room for trains and horses and guns.
See what she said. If you're not there, like mourning your lover or like, professing your love, then it's not really a place for this kind of stuff.
This lasted a long time. 1607 to 1912 was the period for the Wild West.
16 what?
1607 to 1912 is what it says. American. This is just the first Google thing that comes up, but this is like it says American frontier. What ended the cowboy era? The invention of barbed wire fencing ended the cowboy era.
No, because the whole point of cowboys was to look after cattle and kind of maneuver them from one place to another. It was like more so for the farming industry. It wasn't for like what most movies make it about. But
that's
yeah,
what I mean. 1912 is so late. Like we were deep in like throwing factories up everywhere, and like the Wild West was just ending. That's insane.
I think that's why it lined up like that, because I think at that point, so I think the Industrial Revolution started in the 1800s, right? And it carried on going until the very
late 1700s to mid 1800s for Industrial Revolution.
Yeah. So I think it's because like where cowboys were, it wasn't like our normal like Yorkshire fields where the cows are so nicely fed and the chickens have like enough room, like a happy egg. But it's like because it was just so barren and there was nothing there, and the amount of animals you could actually rear were like so limited. The places like York, etc., they probably got all of that Industrial Revolution stuff way quicker than those places. So by the time they actually got there, it wasn't needed anymore. They realized, oh, our way of living isn't necessary anymore. I don't understand why people love it so much, because it just like still feels like a wee bit like racist.
I cannot think of the Wild West without thinking about old men. Like it just seems like a thing that old men like. Has a woman ever written a Western?
Yes, romance ones.
Well,
isn't that one like most famous like kind of Romeo and Juliet story, like a Western, the great something?
West Side Story, isn't that set in like Chicago or something?
No, maybe that's not West Side Story. It's another one. It's like comments help.
West Side Story is definitely set in a city, from what I remember. New York. No, it's not. It just says that it's on the New York stage. Somebody's like going to be a massive musical fan in the comments and going to be like raging. The Sharks and the Jets are rival gangs fighting for the same territory. It's the west side of the city. West Side Story. I thought it was.
I don't think it's that one. Fuck. I'm not remembering. But like technically the Mask of Zorro counts as a Western, and that's one of my favorite movies of all time. So maybe there is hope for Red Country. Technically, yes, because it was the time of like Industrial Revolution as well as colonization, as well as like a fictionalized history. So I guess it's something that we could see. I'm obsessed with how we've somehow connected Red Country to West Side Story. Listen, in January we're going to be singing. We're all going to wear cowboy hats, fedora, everything.
Which has nothing to do with West Side Story.
Nope, but my interpretation of it apparently, because I can't remember what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I think something that immediately turns me off about Westerns is that they are just so masculine. Like, there's nothing even in a stereotypical Western that appeals to me. Even the fashion for women, I would say, is not great.
I remember, like, Calamity Jane. Oh my god, don't tell me I've been thinking of Calamity Jane. It was really about like this blonde, white, really pretty girl who's like kind of around that period of time. That was the closest I could interpret, but I feel like other than the romance genre, you don't really see women talking like writing lessons. Probably because it was also a continuation of a very patriarchal society.
Yeah.
You all just need to have you all just have to randomly break out in snapping and dancing during live, yes.
God. I am excited to see how it fits in. Like the problem that I have with the standalones right now is like I understand that he's positioning characters in places. Like we saw the rise of Monza. Do we need to see the rise of Monza though? Can't we just start a new trilogy and be like, oh, this woman was on a mad revenge mission and she ended up like being is she the queen, the leader of Syria?
She is essentially, she's the archduchess or something.
Moving on to a trilogy, I just don't feel like seeing these changes is going to make a grand difference to my understanding and enjoyment of the trilogy. So that's why I feel like it's almost disappointing because I'm not loving the first few hundred pages of any of these standalones, but then I'm liking the end. But then those characters are only ever going to be mentioned in passing in later books. Like, I miss following Giselle and Logan and Glockter, and they're never going to be main characters again. So then it's even more, it's almost like blue balling because, like, I want to follow Craw, but he's never going to be a main character again because as far as I'm aware, he never repeats his main characters.
Mm-hmm. In this series, that's so fucking sad.
See, as far as I'm aware, I know that like the original three as far as I'm aware, never become main characters. So I would assume that it's the same for the rest of them, that they would always be like, there'll be characters in the world. Like obviously Giselle's the king of the Union, so when he is referenced, we know that it's him. But he's never he's not a perspective character.
One thing I remember when we finished the first original trilogy, I think it was off the back of us just reading Robin Hobb and then reading Martin before that, because we saw those direct connections in the continuation of certain character story, it is a bit jarring to go from 3 books. And then I remember we had the assumption that, are we going to follow Giselle's children, this, that, or the other? And that hasn't happened. No such references in these first 2 books. And with the Monza thing, I feel because there might be the implications of what she's done to the rest of the world, because she literally went to these other places, stirred some shit, and then carried on. That's what's gonna maybe play a bigger part, especially because Giselle isn't a fan of her, and obviously whoever Ishri's working for isn't a fan of her. Not Giselle, sorry. Baez isn't a fan of her as well, and then Ishri's not a fan of her, so like they're obviously gonna want to depose her. And then Gorst obviously is about to make the connection that Shivers was there that day, that he failed his duty, and that he was deranked in the first place and disgraced. And I feel like maybe it could come into play again potentially later. But one thing I can say for certain is I thought the mirroring between Gorst and Shivers in these last 2 books was also quite like a fascinating thing he did, in the sense that we saw, on one hand, we saw like a morally good person go into full violent depravity, and then someone else who like felt they had fallen, similar level of depravity, only they've been elevated in a completely different way. And I think that goes to show civilized nature of being champions versus what the North champion.
We did mention that in the last live show, but with the comparison of Shivers and Logan, how Shivers hated Logan. But when we meet Logan, he's trying to be a good man and realizing that he can't be. And the same kind of happens with Shivers, apart from Shivers gets to a point where, because like Logan is always striving to be better while feeling like he can't escape being worse, where Shivers gets to the point where like, I'm going to be a good man, like I'm going to be better than everybody else. And then he ends up just fully like sinking into it and accepting his fate of like, no, I'm just going to be a terrible person. His inclusion in this book was unexpected for me. I didn't expect him to be such a pivotal part in it, but I'm also intrigued. Somebody said like, I want to see like where he's going to go in the future, because he's been in both of these books. He's very the strong but silent type in
Yeah.
this book. I'm like, does Shivers have an end game, or is the point that he's just kind of given up and he's riding it out now? The same way that Logan was in the first book, where he kind of just said, I don't really care what's going on. I'm just going to do what I'm told and see what happens. Because he's just like on anyone's side. Like, he doesn't seem to have any agenda of his own.
I think he's going for what's easiest and most convenient at the moment. Obviously, he went north, and that's easy for him to be there, as opposed to when he was down south, and it felt like he didn't really meet much compassion other than Monza. But again, like, I can understand why he turned on her and said he was tired of her scorn or whatever the fuck, when she never, like, you pissed her off because you decided to have a fucking violent outburst when she didn't tell you to. Like, what the fuck, dude? But I am curious about what his end game is, if there is one, if he is just slogging around. But I am even more curious about what's happening with Monza, and if there will ever be some kind of reunion with them. I like, as much as I love romance, I that is out of the cards. That's not happening between the two of them. But the way he just turned on her after all of that, and it felt like that was the person who accepted him the most, was a bit.
I don't know. I feel like he was very valid in turning on her because he got tortured for her. And it's not something that you just get over, you know? Like, as some people do, it depends how you process trauma and grief and stuff. Some people would get over it and be like, look, it's not really your fault. And some people would hold it against her forever. And he held it against her forever. And you know what? I would too, I feel. And like, even though, like, because you can consciously know that somebody did something, like, or something happened that wasn't actually somebody's fault and they didn't maliciously intend to hurt you. But then on the same vein as that, like, she took the blame for it without ever mentioning it. Like, she felt like it was her fault, so she distanced herself from him. So at a time where maybe he needed her to be more apologetic, she withdrew from him when he needed her, which reinforced his belief that it was all her fault. And that was one of my favorite parts of that book. I would like to see them come together and not necessarily fight, but definitely confront each other, and see what kind of happens from that. But yeah, like, it's definitely never going romantic again. But I liked that we had that kind of, like, it blossomed into a romance and then just very much was like, and it's not, I don't think that there's any kind of reconciliation that they can come to now because of the level of, like, bitterness between them.
There has to be outside of this position, though, to even put them in that position, it feels like, because she told him to not come back. And on top of that, it's just like, on one hand, completely, like, having, like, she's let him live. She's been like, fuck you, I don't owe you shit. But she was like, no, here, take this. I don't fucking need it anymore. Go back to your beloved North. But just don't have nothing to do with what's happening down there. I think she's also, like, I guess, processing her own trauma. Because what she went through was very traumatic. But I think she carries on trying to do that. She carried on trying to do the next thing as opposed to addressing anything. And she's alone, right? That's why the last time we remember her was her being alone. Which is kind of sad, and I feel like Shivers is also alone. He has no allies in the North. He just works with people. He doesn't actually, like, they don't care about him.
I was surprised at how willing he was to back Calder. I expected him to almost, like, turn on Calder straight away, but the way that he was, like, just willing to be whatever Calder wanted him to be was surprising to me. I feel the way that he is truly seems to be just going with the flow right now.
I think he also knows that he needs to be around smart people to some degree to actually get through, because, like, he was around Monza. Sure, that caused a lot of issues with her, but she was smarter than he was. And everybody come to understand the ways of the world in a way that's, like, colder than, like, other people would approach it. Like, I don't know. Like, you need to be, like, if you are a strong person, it's sometimes smart to be around a more tactical person than to just, like, go your own way, because strength only means so much.
Characters that I'm very excited to see coming up in the next books at some point. I don't know if they're going to be in Red Country, but I want them to appear soon before I kind of forget about them, is Vitari and Vitari's not husband, baby daddy. Because I loved them in Best Served Cold. Like, the Vitari, I just really like her. But then the plot twist of her baby daddy being is he an eater?
Yeah, he's an eater.
Yeah. Loved that. And then what does that mean
One-
for her? Oh, there is potential, because I have just read the synopsis of the first book in the next trilogy, and it is following like the prince who's Giselle's son, Glockter's daughter, and then the first of the Magi is briefly mentioned, and some characters who I don't think we know. But I'm wondering if Ari's kids are going to be relevant.
I just pray we don't have incest. I remember that was something we were worried about all the way back, because we were just like, oh, but Giselle's kid doesn't know that like Doctor's daughter is actually like his. Like we were worried about that, and the thing is, it's like a part of me was like, oh no, maybe we've just been a bit delulu because of like the whole George thing. But then in Better Served Cold, Joe is not scared to go there, so it's just like, oh, please don't do it, don't do it. Like, because I don't want the dramatic irony of us knowing and them not knowing, and it's like, this is so bad. Oh god. But yeah, that's something I'm scared of. But the whole Vitari thing, I love that so much. The revelation at the end that she was like the one who saved her, and like when you realize in the beginning when he's talking about his wife and his kids, it's just like, oh my, I literally had to like put my tablet down and I had to like stare at the mirror like, what?
That was like the saving grace of that book for me. I did still give it 2 stars. It doesn't make up for everything else. But then I do find it frustrating that I'm reading so much of these books that I don't care about, because it did take me a long time to warm up to the heroes as well, for it to then just pull it out of the bag at the end. And I'm like, the way that it was pulled out of the bag in Best Served Cold, the actual bit in the middle that I didn't like was not necessary. Like, it wasn't relating to that twist. So if he wants to deliver twists of that caliber, if he wants to just pull it out of the bag that Vitari's husband, or baby daddy, because they're not married, is an eater, like, you don't need all of this stuff with Monza in the middle. And I feel like the stuff that happens at the end of these books feels really poignant, while the rest in the middle just feels kind of like filler. And like, I know somebody said that they enjoyed the journey, and like, yeah, the journey is enjoyable. If you like, I enjoyed the heroes, it was an enjoyable time reading it. But then I feel like it's quite jarring and out of place that we have these like big plot twists that relate to the wider story, and then that he has the audacity to call them standalones. And it's like, there's just moments in these books that literally, it's not even like subtle Easter eggs. It's like that whole moment with Ghost and Shivers in this book. Like, if you haven't read any of the books, you're going to be like, what is actually happening here?
Literally.
It's going to be so weird and out of place.
They are not standalones. The most standalone aspect of them is they're like plays apart from each other, but they're not standalones. And I'm grateful
they're
we're
like
reading them in the context
stories within the world, but they have so much that links on that, like, it literally, there's big portions that just wouldn't make sense if you hadn't read the others.
There's a very clear timeline, and so it's just like kind of. I also completely agree with you. I think I felt this beforehand. No offense to Joe, and everyone has their own writing. I respect and I love what he's done. I do think that the books are sometimes longer than they need to be, and I felt like that before when we were reading Wars. In Best Served Cold, I didn't feel it as much because I loved that each part was each assassination. But in this one, I felt it quite a bit as well, because it's like, yes, war can be lengthy, especially if you're like reading about the same battle from so many different perspectives, etc. That's completely true, and I'm not invalidating anyone, especially someone who's like a veteran. Like, they would probably feel the same way how war feels. But it does feel like they are longer than they need to be, because then I think that just makes it even more stressful, because then you start and you're like, okay, when am I going to start actually enjoying this? And that's just something that you don't really get as much when you're into a book, but it's more so like when you're about to start a book, and there's just so much weight. Like 500 pages is a lot to ask from someone, especially like when they're densely packed. His writing is simpler. Definitely some of the simplest writing we've read, but it doesn't change the fact that there's a lot of words and there's a lot of characters, and it's very daunting. And so it's like, it's harder to connect to people when you have so many people.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to do at the beginning of a book as well, because even though, and I feel like that they're trying to figure out who everyone is. Like, it took me ages to remember who Ghost was on this book, and I was like, I know that we know him from the first trilogy, and because like even in the beginning it just says like he's the Royal Observer, and I'm like, no, but I need to know who he was before. Like, so it takes a while to connect all of those dots, and there's so many characters that like we've heard in passing, they were side characters, and it takes a while to like place all of those people. So then coming into this as a standalone, not knowing who anybody is and having to try and understand all of that, plus there's literally parts of this book that you won't understand. if you haven't read the other books, because we know that Ghost is valid. But if you've just read this book, you're like, what is he doing? Like, what does this mean if it's not an Easter egg, you know? Like, it's literally senseless to somebody who hasn't read the rest of the books.
Literally, and you wouldn't feel the way that other surrounding characters feel around Baez if you hadn't gone through the big fat slap in the face that we dealt with in the book of that. Like, it's... I don't know. I don't fully understand his why he would say it this way. But like after Red Country, it's only the collection of short stories.
Yes.
Or is that the series?
So they range. There's some like following Lockter and stuff. There's one that has Logan in it, I think. This is just, what's it called? Sharp Ends, maybe?
Sorry, a comment. Also excited to see what the woman Logan was with. Can't remember her name because she wasn't in this battle. Maybe Pharaoh. I don't know.
We were potentially thinking that she was going to turn up with a magic baby.
I think we think that about everyone.
Just with it being generational, though, I think it's possible.
Like, a part of me also thinks with how much Shiz and Monza were banging, she could turn up with a magic baby too. Well, only he won't be magic. He'd just be like crazy, probably.
Okay, so the short stories mentioned in the synopsis, there's Glockter, Craw, and his dozen. So that, I imagine, is set before the heroes, because he doesn't have a dozen at this point. He would be the second for Calder and Scale. Shivedia, who is a thief in Styria, and Bethod. So obviously he's dead. And this is when Logan still works for him as well. So that's like way in the past. Once again, wondering what the relevance of these is, because it's not even a long short story collection. It's 304 pages. So what is the relevance of these? Like, do they add anything, or is it, because you can have short story collections that don't mean anything. It's just kind of like, oh, if you enjoy these characters in this story, here's a little bit extra. Or they could actually have a point. But actually, there is why did my brain just go blank? Oh, Baez is working with everyone in the puppet in the shadows, like he's a little puppet master, and I think Bethod was one of his puppets, right? So maybe like these stories will have something to do with like earlier interactions with Baez before the actual plot of the series. Yeah, Monza's pregnant.
But yeah, like we don't know if it's the Dukes or Shivers.
Okay, but just because sorry, I just realized that everyone in the comments, or a couple of people in the comments, think that Ishri might be Pharaoh. I think we've seen Ishri before.
Yeah, we have seen. I'm pretty sure we've seen Ishri before. Also, Pharaoh is described as brown. Ishri is described as black. They're not the same black or person. Also, Pharaoh can't do magic like that. She's just.
Is she one of the eaters that was with Yulwe? No, she's not an eater. Is she an immortal?
All I remember is that she is someone who worked with a Gurkish, and I think that's the first time we kind of came across her, maybe in the original trilogy, because she was someone Baez didn't like. But I feel like I'm crazy.
I recognize it because of the bandages. The bandage lady was an eater, Jenny said. Monza, yeah, for sure, is pregnant.
I'm so curious. To be honest, I would think that it was Shivers just because they banged way more than she did bang that king dude who died.
I think Monza's baby's too young to be a prominent perspective in the trilogy, because I think at this point we're 10 years-ish, I would assume, after the end of the trilogy. So
they said, so Gorst said that he fought Giselle 9 years ago.
Yeah. So that would be the end of the first book.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. So it's like we're going on like say 7-ish years at least.
So Monza's kid is only he's gonna be baby.
There is a character. Is there a character from Styria in? Because it's the synopsis of the first book in the trilogy doesn't actually really say what the book's about. It just, like in terms of the actual plot, it just says like that there's characters and like the kind of like with the first trilogy, how all of the characters have their own little purpose that is nothing to do with the actual plot, because the plot is like background and what's going on in the world. That's what the synopsis of the first book is like. It's just like Glocta's daughter's a socialite and she wants to claw herself to the top, claw her way to the top of the slag heap of society.
Why are they all like this? She got that from her dad's.
Yeah.
Oh God! Oh my God! It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. It's going to happen. And what can we do about it other than witness it and read it? Her freaking Giselle's kid and daughter. Oh no!
The issue with Giselle's kid is that Leo Dambrock struggles to win fame on the battlefield, and he hopes for help from the crown, but the prince is useless. Says Prince also is a man who specializes in disappointment, so that's Giselle's kid.
So why is that? I'm sorry, this is already sounding like Calder again. We just read a character who was so again, this repeats something that you said earlier. It does feel like sometimes he's repeating certain traits amongst his characters, and Calder was so prominent in this book that it's just like another Calder.
With the guiding hand of the first one of magic. Yeah, and it's like the age of machine dawns, but the age of magic refuses to die.
You say that there was no magic in this book, so
Rebecca, it is unclear whether the series is finished. Joe Abercrombie has not definitively finished it. So there is potential, but at the same time, I don't know if he's actually working on anything or planned. Like, I know he hasn't said it is finished, but I think it wraps up in a place that would be a satisfying end, I guess. But with it being like not 100% finished, that means that I think the overarching plot is still going.
Okay, hold on. So I just went on the official Joe Abercrombie fandom page, and he does have another trilogy.
Oh, the Half a King one. I don't think that's relevant. I actually don't know what that's about.
The Age of Madness trilogy. I'm not reading into it too much. It says is
the Age of Madness trilogy is the second trilogy in First Law. Yeah. So that's the one that follows everyone's kids. And then after that, he said like that one has just finished being published, that trilogy, but it's not officially done. It's just that last trilogy is done at the minute.
Yeah. And that a book a year, that's good-ish. But yeah, like that finished in 2021. I'm intrigued because I really like as a trilogy, I did like I just like following the same characters. I'm boring. And I just like seeing them change.
Yeah, but you say kind of like Hob, but like not kind of like Hob anymore, because Hob's working on more Elderlings books. Like we've had that confirmation now. Whether it's published anytime soon is a different matter. Like whether she gets to the end of that is like, I'm not holding out hope that she will, and I'm happy with where it ended if she doesn't, but I will still read more because she proves that she still has it in her to write good books. So it's not a case of, like with some authors, you feel like they're beating a dead horse just continuing. Like I trust Robin Hobb will still be producing quality. It's just I know that she doesn't write with any kind of speed anymore, so I don't know. And she's not the youngest, so I don't know if she'd get through a full trilogy at the pace that she currently writes.
And she does write really, really well and very good quality. Joe's, I can't blame in this situation. I really can't blame authors if they get tired of the same world, like they're done with it. But the thing for me is like I just still feel we haven't had the big event that we needed to happen. You know what I mean? It's like I feel a lot of times, especially in a series, you feel like there's at least one big event or like multiple big events, right? And then you're going to say, like, even this battle, I can't really consider it a big event in his entire series, considering he thinks it can be regarded as a standalone. Then that, to me, says it's not the big thing, like this amalgamation of everything that the series is leading up to. And it's the first one was the failure with the whole magic situation. But in this one, it's like, there has to be something like, but Bayar's going around freaking trying to manipulate all these leaders, having an issue with Monza has to become something, especially now you've got this whole next generation of Monza, potentially Pharaoh having a child, as well as like following those kids. There has to be something like that's my copium. That like this next trilogy has to have like a big event where all of Bayar's plans come together and it's like a massive mind fuck. Like I need that.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I don't know if I'm going to get it though.
Yeah.
Like I'm not.
Well, it's called Age of Madness. Like, are we reading it?
It says it's in the schedule. It will be read.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, are we going to read the short stories before then?
Yeah, so the short stories are in for January, with the live show being February because they're only 300 pages.
Wait,
so the next
cool.
live
So when
show
are we...
for the third standalone, Red Country, the live show will be in January, and then the live show for the short stories will be February.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because it's only a 300-page
then...
book, and like it's broken down into short stories. We can knock out like a short story a week and be done in time for the live show.
Yeah. And I think...
And then after that, the first Age of Madness live show will then be April.
Also, it being called the Age of Madness already feels like there's like a lot of chaos is going to happen, and hopefully that means a lot of chaotic magic for me. Because I know he's been like trying to keep the magic on the down low right now and really show people's humanity, but I just want to see people like get torn apart by demons and magic, like on a mass scale. Fuck these people up, force them into a situation where they have to come together. Don't give me a shitty conclusion like Game of Thrones, and give me something that actually feels like it's not sorrowful and sad the way Fitz in the Fall ended. Give me something that's like fucking crazy. Maybe that's just what I want.
That this series isn't what we typically read in fantasy, because like I tend to read a lot of like complex, intricate stuff that's like really well plotted and stuff. And Joe Abercrombie turns a lot of fantasy tropes on their head, and also like focuses on like small stories almost, and like humanity as opposed to the big epic fantasy plot, which is fine because like there's fantasy like. I've spoken about it recently about like genre expectation, how I'm always looking for epic fantasy. So sometimes I'll read like a standalone fantasy and I'll be like, I don't like it. And it's because I like epic fantasy. And obviously, like, it's not on that scale. It was never intended to be that scale. It's a different type of fantasy that serves different purposes, which you could argue the First Law potentially is. But then my argument is, why do you have this plot in the background if you're not going to do anything with it? Why does it exist? Just take it out if you're not building up to something.
Yeah, and like don't call books standalone, which are clearly building on a plot, and all these like tiny things that have happened, all these intrinsic moments are going to come together and create something bigger, because clearly it's meant to, like as you said earlier, like it's made to be read a certain way. And I think I said this before previously, it's like it feels like he's very characters and writing characters like a character study. How would these people who were born in this situation handle these situations? And they're very real, like they're very rustic, like they're not, we do have fuck ups, we do have people acting like idiots and selfish or like very naive, and I appreciate that a lot, because it does feel like his characters are actually people in these situations, as opposed to, oh, I love this character because they're so perfect and nice. But that's why I'm kind of more interested to see how these people, these characters who feel so real, actually approach those more intense situations.
Because it also like always just has an air of like futility, like everyone kind of just in every situation kind of just goes fuck it. Just like goes with the flow a little bit.
That's absolutely it. And it's like, maybe that's the kind of commentary he's making with Dark in this, like, and that's why he's called the father of Grimdark, because everything keeps going in such a grim and raw direction. But it's like, I'm fine with if you want to keep things kind of hopeless and real, but give me more stakes, give me more scale. It doesn't feel like I felt stakes, like, because even at the end of this, even though I had a preference for Calder, I didn't really care who won on either side.
I think that I always wanted the North to win, but like I said, I feel the Northmen feel more honest. It's kind of like, it is just a critique on society and stuff. Like, the Northmen feel like they believe in something, like they're fighting for something, even though a lot of them are quite aware of the futility of battle. Like they're fighting for their own honor. They're fighting because it's like what the people have always done this entire time. They have a less civilized approach to life. And the Union, it feels like pageantry, just like the military in Western countries is partially about pageantry. It's a rite of passage. It's like what men should do, and that's what the Union feels like. Whereas the North,
it's so colonial.
Yeah, and it feels like, I don't know, like the Union feels like going through the motions, and it's weird because like they're both doing the same thing. They're both fighting because it's what men should do. They're both fighting for their own honor and glory and prestige. They're fighting for their countries, but the Northmen just feel so much more honest about it, and the Union just feels so much more forced.
The Union feel like they are also kind of very deluded in thinking that they have it honestly feels like manifest destiny. Like it feels like they think they're doing what's better for everyone in this situation, quote unquote Union. But it's like I think there was this one scene where someone was asking, why are we here? Like, why are we actually here? And then someone was explaining all the situations that led to it, but he still didn't understand what the fucking point was. Because on the North side, it makes sense. They want to stay the North. But on the Union side, it doesn't really fucking make sense why they're trying to do all this. They're only doing it because buyers told them to.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, I feel like the Union is just like, you're just following blindly what the person above says, whereas the North, like, they change the like allegiances quickly. Like they change who their king is, they change who they stand for and who they betray, because they actually, for all the ways that they're stupid and they just follow along orders and go along with stuff, they actually care about their country and like are invested in themselves and their lives. They're not going to go along and do something necessarily stupid. Like an officer will follow a stupid order because that's what officers do, or I feel like the Northmen would be like, well, actually I'll kill you before I'll follow your order if I can. I really liked the thing with Craw is it's sad because there are people not just in like the military or any kind of aspect like that, but just in general, like you always go back to what you're familiar with. Because can you put that down? She stole one of my slippers.
She's like, here you go, mommy.
Yeah, but she won't give it back. She just wants me to chase her. But like people always go back to what they know, even if it's not necessarily what they want, because they don't know how to live any other way. Like Craw doesn't necessarily want to fight, but like he's given so much of his life to it. He has nothing else. Like he's coming back because he should have got married and he was a carpenter once, and it's like, but you're not that person anymore.
It's just like Shiver's going back to his own, like, this lifestyle. That's all he knows. Gorse just wants to be promoted because that's all he knows. And it is like this sad cycle that feels like all of these men, especially in this wartime, are pushed into. And again, I think it's important. It's like an important commentary on these situations. But another part of me is like, this is not what I thought I would be getting from this series.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not against it. And I completely respect him wanting to write this book, and I respect what it's done, and I think it was done well. It's just not what I thought I would get from this series. Becca's dog is doing a thing. I'm lagging so badly on my screen. I'm so sorry, audience. Look at the boy. I mean, girl. She's a girl.
You're not lagging on this side. You're fine.
Okay, thank God. On my screen, I'm lagging so bad.
Yeah. The only reason that Beck changed is because he was young enough to change. Like he had a week of war and didn't like it, so he went home. And he knows that, like, and he's young. Like he has his whole life to be something different. Crow gave his whole life to war, and I mean, I don't know how old he is because like he's been at war his entire life. Like he's old, but he might be like 40. So like I don't know how old he actually is, but like realistically, like he's gone to an empty house where he has no belongings, no one waiting for him, and he's not a carpenter. I thought it was really funny when they said they called him straight edge and then said that there was no straight edge there in his carpentry, and I thought that was really funny.
Someone, by the way, mentioned to you, that means First Law and Wheel of Time in the same month for you at one point?
Yeah, no, they will be in the same month until we finish First Law. It might change though, because I am busy for the first 3 weeks of February, so I don't know whether we'll get to have the live show. I'm glad that it's sharp ends though, actually, because that means I won't struggle to read it.
If it is just a short story collection, yeah.
Yeah, but the live show for I might actually move Wheel of Time because I can read Sharp Ends for February. I can't read Wheel of Time in February. Because I'm going to Thailand for 10 days, and then I have in the space of, so I get back on the 11th, and then between then and the 21st I've got 4 gigs and a show in London. So I'm away from home every other day.
Yeah, like it feels like the only thing you'll be able to get out of you is maybe a short story collection, because then it's easier and more digestible as opposed to like a Wheel of Time book. It's been on my TBR for the longest time, but those bitches are big and it's daunting.
I mean, I've got a 12-hour flight to and from Thailand, but I'm not traveling with Wheel of Time because I need like more easy brain energy than Wheel of Time.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that
no
might
Wheel
be...
of Time vacation.
Oh yeah, like absolutely not. Do we have anything else to touch upon, or are we about done?
I'm pretty happy. I'm excited for the next thing we're going to read, but I'm also kind of happy to have got these out of the way, because like for the past week or so, because even though I like started reading in like October, I did not have time. I'm gonna be real with you, Chief. If people don't know, I work in video game advertising, and this is like I'm working on some pretty big titles at the moment. Like some of the big, like one of the biggest things I'm ever working on is literally coming out in February, and I'm just like, it's really hard time to find things to read. So I'm just gonna be reading things a bit more digestible, before we have to return to this world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have when's the next? Yeah, we've got until January, so we're good.
Yeah. For me, not for you, Mrs. Let me vlog all of Christmas and make candles for Christmas.
Well, I vlog everything, so that's not even hard. Like it's just standard at this point.
True. Your like work mentality towards this, honestly, so I freaking commend you, man.
Thanks. I try.
You do. It shows. Very good.
I just have a schedule now, and like I am actually a little bit stressed at the minute because I've got a lot of stuff to do. I ended up booking a last minute trip for the end of this month that I wasn't originally prepared for, so now I've had to accelerate all of my work into a more condensed like space of time.
You have a week.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and I thought I was bad. Well,
yeah. But that wraps up the live show for the heroes, pretty much. Thank you all for coming. The next live show, as we've said multiple times, is going to be in January, so I hope you all enjoy your Christmas. It'll probably go back to like the second Sunday now, which I don't even know is the second Sunday of November. Not a clue. But yeah, it should be on the second Sunday unless we need to rearrange for like schedule clashes or anything. But thank you for joining. Zaf, you can take over wrapping it up because you're the one who's going to be pressing the end stream button, so I don't want to keep talking when I don't know when it's closing.
Yeah, I'm lagging so bad. I'm so sorry, but I swear my internet will be better for our next live show. Thank you so much for spending time with us, and we look forward to discussing with you the next time. Bye!